know that I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me, and I gladly stay.
This is Wild About Liberty, where the community joins together. Now here's your host, Terry Wild.
Well, thank you for tuning in. We've got a good show. We're going to have a kind of a roundtable discussion with two very talented people that are working to do everything they can to deal with all of the drama that's coming our way through the political scene. So our first guest is Eric Rowland. And Eric, you've been working with the Constitutionalists of California now for how many years?
Let's see. April of 2020, May. I found them in June. And founded my own chapter. So June of 2020. Early 21. I don't remember the month. I founded the Clovis chapter.
Right. Well, you know, it's been an effective organization that's doing a lot for the community, a lot for the county. And then our other guest is someone that's frequently on the show because he's so darn smart and he knows a lot about everything that's going on. And so, Lawrence Hebron, thanks again for coming on.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. Always glad to chime in and throw in my 2 cents worth. That's about all I have to offer. But
well, why don't you?
Now, Marines always have more than 2 cents worth. So thank you for serving.
2 rounds.
Give us a little bit of your background. I'm sorry. Give us a little bit of your background because this is the first time Eric's meeting you as well as the listening audience.
Well, in terms of the Constitution, I have long been a supporter of and an uncompromising supporter of, I think, the two documents that are most important to our country, and that is the Bible and the Constitution. We were founded as a Bible-believing nation. We hear it from the beginning all the way through. The commitment of the founders to this Bible base. I mean, in George Washington's first inaugural address, at one point he said, "The propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right, which heaven itself has ordained."
Ooh, so, that's pretty profound.
Yeah. I mean, he basically said, before that, he looked back and he says, there's no way you can see how we came to this point, which was April 30th, 1789, when he was sworn in for the first time. He says, you cannot look back and see what brought us to this point without seeing the hand of God. And then the remark that I just quoted, he's basically saying, we can't go forward and expect to succeed without doing it God's way. So that's first and foremost what we have to do. And then this historical geniuses who put together one of the most remarkable documents in history, the Constitution of the United States, has guided us through this. As you look back through history, and I remember when I was in school, they would teach us, you have to memorize all these different types of governments that there are. There's monarchy, and there's democracy, and there's a republic, and there's theocracy, and so forth and so on. Well, after I got out from under the influence of the educational establishment and kept studying on my own, it occurred to me that there've really only been basically 2 forms of government ever. The one that's been the most common, I would call a feudal kleptocracy. Now, a kleptocracy, that's a real word. I didn't make it up. Some of you may know klepto, like a kleptomaniac. Well, that's a Greek for to steal, somebody who steals. So a kleptocracy is an organization like a government that's organized to steal. And that's what virtually all governments have been designed to do. And where the feudalism comes in, despite people's thinking that, well, feudalism ended hundreds of years ago. No, it's still very common. It means that there's a power elite at the top, but there's not enough of them to control everybody. So they buy off a class of vassals. And now what they're using to buy them off is a lot different than what they did hundreds of years ago. But between those two groups, now they have enough to control the masses. And the main part of their effort has been to steal from us. We're the ones who create wealth. They take the wealth. And almost every government throughout history has been like that in some form or another. And the framers who put the Constitution together said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do something very, very different. And they did, and it's been working until recent decades.
Until Gavin Newsom.
No, long before that.
Well,
Things started falling apart with the progressive movement much earlier than that.
Well, that's interesting. You know, Eric, tell us a little bit about your feeling, and you've dedicated a lot of time, effort, and energy to help build this organization. What made you do that?
I thoroughly believe in the Constitution. I believe that government should be representative. I'm thrilled that we are not a true democracy, meaning we don't have mob rule. Our Constitution was inspired by the church. All of those major ideas that were put in the Declaration and in the Constitution, all those early amendments, the Bill of Rights, they were inspired by the church. People don't realize that. Those ideas were discussed in church. Church was part of the culture and politics beforehand. And I think that's an incredibly important point. We need the church to get back to leading the way. That doesn't mean that they necessarily have to pay attention to Republican and Democrat, but they've got a book that talks about biblical values. And I think that and the fact that our rights, because our forefathers were brilliant enough to give us rights, or actually acknowledge that our rights were given to us by a higher power, by God.
Exactly.
That's incredibly important. So we have something precious here. We don't have, these extremes. I would define two types of government a little differently than you, but I don't disagree with your idea. I think you've got essentially dictatorships of various forms. It could be Marxism. They're on the left, except does it matter whether they're on the left or it's a king or it's a true dictator if you have no freedom? I thoroughly agree with you that they found a different path. And I am passionately patriotic about defending that way of life. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that, I'm a self-employed businessman. I was able to pick my own path, define my own destiny. And that's why the rest of the world is running here. So all of those things I always paid attention, but I was not a political activist until COVID hit. And I went, wait, government decided they're in charge of my health and safety, not protecting my liberty. Well, that's not okay. It's not okay at all. And I went, it's on. I need to find a way to galvanize people, to educate people about the Constitution, to get them to work, particularly with local government, because I think that our biggest solutions come from local government. Yes, if we elected somebody like Trump, that would give us a beacon of hope. But the path forward of we have to fight for it, we have to be engaged, is really the important thing.
Well, you hold meetings weekly?
Weekly. Both chapters hold meetings weekly. I make most of the Kingsburg chapter meetings, and I run the meeting at the Clovis chapter.
Well, tell them the times and the locations, and is there a website they can go to?
They can go to constitutionalistforcalifornia.com.
Mm-hmm.
Once you look there, you go to the calendar, and almost every Thursday, we're missing 2 Thursdays this month, the one tonight, because this is the 16th, and the next week, which is Thanksgiving, so I hope you spend it with some time with your family and appreciate the precious gifts that God has granted us. I think we're a special country. I don't believe all cultures are equal. All cultures have some good things about them, but this is uniquely special. We're a beacon to the world.
Well, it's encouraging and it's actually inspiring to me that when all this came about and we began to get under the control of the COVID situation, the lockdown, we couldn't go here, we couldn't go there, we couldn't sing in church, all that stuff was going on. But just before that, I know Cindy invited me to go to Kingsburg and to be in some of the early meetings. And the people that showed up at that early time, before there was a whole lot of other things that were organized in the county, it really became a hub and a place for people to join and network together and figure out a way to do something about all this stuff. And you guys have been growing and exerting your influence, and it's gratifying to see that you stayed in there this long and it's developed into a really effective organization for the county.
We do a bunch of different things. There's a newspaper that, you were absolutely connected to the roots of, but they've since moved on and have a conservative slanted newspaper. We've got a website. We've got multiple people on our Republican Central Committee. We've got people that regularly attend both Kingsburg and Fresno and Clovis government meetings to kind of keep track of what's going on. We have people that regularly go speak at all those meetings. By the way, when you go speak at government meetings, you should be polite. It's not just time to go yell at them.
Exactly.
If they're doing something right, encourage them. You need to build bridges. If you don't know your local elected representatives, how are you going to have a voice at the table? If they just see you as the crazy guy that comes in and screams at them all the time, they're going to be like, oh man, every time they see you. Instead, you want to be able to have a conversation and move them in the right direction.
Well, you're involved in the schools.
Yes,
so
I've made, in the last 2 years, I'm at 27 school board meetings for Clovis Unified and 22 for Fresno Unified. I've stopped going to Fresno Unified for a while because there's no hope for a while. Until there's a new group of candidates to support, there's no hope. They're all woke leftists. And it's the worst school district in California, worst large school district anyway, and bottom 5% in the nation.
Incredible. What a digression. Well, Lawrence, the Constitution has never been replicated, has it?
No, it's quite unique. And we talk about anymore, they talk about American exceptionalism as being something bad. No, American exceptionalism is based on the foundation that was created in the Constitution. The Constitution basically gave the people to live the life they wanted to live as long as they weren't bothering somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of an oversimplification, but it basically got down to go live your life, go have a ball as long as you aren't hurting somebody else.
With as little government interference as possible. With as little government interference as possible.
Yeah, you unleash all of that inner power. Other governments have worked to suppress the masses. In the United States, we worked to liberate the masses, and we took all of that energy and just let it loose. And it's like a volcano erupting. And golly gee, in just a matter of a few decades, we were becoming a phenomenon. We even had this guy named de Tocqueville come over here from France because he said, what the heck's going on over there across the pond? This is amazing. I've got to go study this. And he did. And one of the first things he said he noticed was the importance of the church in what was going on in America. He says over in Europe, he saw government and the church at odds with one another. And over in Europe and then over in America, he saw that the church was kind of the foundation, provided a foundation for so much of what was going on. And it too helped to liberate the people. You've been set free, so go do something with it. And boy, did we.
Well, you gave them skin in the game. Instead of just giving or getting what some authoritarian form of government handed you, you got the leftovers. Instead, you got incentivized. And that's the unique thing. We've combined capitalism with a representative republic that set people free.
It's awesome.
About the leftovers, we're the ones who created the main meal.
Yeah.
People who create the wealth, the goods and services. That's what wealth is. It's not money. Money is a way of measuring and exchanging wealth. It's the goods and services. And we, the people, are the ones who create that. Then the government, like the kleptocracy I've mentioned, they steal it all from us, and then they give us back, like you said, a few little crumbs of leftovers. So it's really quite outrageous, and it's happening again here now, I'm afraid.
Well, the Constitution is under attack, and without nullifying or weakening the Constitution, the left can't do a thing. The courts and the whole deep state is all involved in trying to diminish the Constitution. How do you guys see that threat? How serious do you think it is?
It's very serious because they're not teaching civics in school. We need to reach out to our communities. We need to support Constitution classes. We need to be talking to our neighbors. Free speech is under assault. And a lot of people, because of the woke culture, they're afraid to speak up. That doesn't mean that free speech necessarily disappeared, but if you're not willing to exercise it, does it really exist for you? We need to find our strength, and we need to educate people.
Yeah, well, Lawrence and I share a common involvement with Dale Brune and the School Choice Initiative that didn't make it at the last election, but we'd love to see it get on the next one on the ballot. And that has to do with the competition of education and how that's a healthy alternative and a healthy way to get our power back, parental rights back. So tell us a little bit about that from your perspective, Lawrence.
Right. You mentioned that Dr. Dale Brune, he's been very involved in the School Choice Initiative to try to get that as an option here in California. And again, it is very important because for most people, the public school is the easiest option. I mean, they already pay taxes. They have a space available for their kids. All they have to do is show up, sign up and show up. But then if the public schools aren't doing the proper job, if they're not honoring the will of the parents, a lot of these parents don't have any other options. There's no money available to them to take to go to a private school or to even homeschool. So the idea of the School Choice Initiative, at least as designed here, and there's many different types of school choice options. And in fact, about 80% of the states in the union have adopted some form of school choice. So this is not some freaky little minority thing that a couple of people have tried. It's become very popular, and we have some statistics to show how successful it has been. So we want to just give people the option. If your school is doing fine, I hate to sound like Obama, who said, well, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. That proved to be a lie. But the truth about school choice is that if you like your public school, fine, stay there. But if you don't, you should have an option to go and take your kids someplace else and get them the education that's going to set them up for life. And that's what this program is designed to do.
The money follows the kid.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah. And I know I'm just waiting. Again, I'm running for the local school board, and I'm just waiting for somebody to challenge me because I was such a big supporter of the School Choice Initiative. I'm waiting for somebody to say, how can you do a good job on a public school board when you are an enemy of the public schools because of your support of school choice? And my answer is school choice is not an enemy of the public schools. The whole point is to give our kids the best education we possibly can. And if the public schools are doing that, great. But a lot of them are not. They've become institutions for indoctrination of a political perspective. They've become engines for undermining our morals and values and our traditions. The issue that we were discussing at the last school board, and I urge any parents listening here to look into this, there is outright pornography, hardcore pornography in many of our public school libraries. Now, I'm not talking about the visual kind, like a Playboy or Penthouse, but the literary kind, where the verbal descriptions of things are so graphic and really so gross, it's disgusting. And I made this point during the public comment portion of the meeting we had last Tuesday. I said, look, I find these materials absolutely disgusting, unless you think that I'm some kind of a puritanical prude and hypersensitive snowflake. I'm a United States Marine veteran, and this stuff is everywhere throughout the Marine Corps. Every Marine has seen it. We're familiar with it. And the excerpts I've read disgust me. Well, anything that disgusts the United States Marine has no place in our kids' libraries. It's just that simple.
Well, and don't assume that it's not anywhere. This is California. If there's any way for them to sneak it in, they're going to. And some of the books, they're not like, Playboy, but they're more like cartoons, but they are absolutely inappropriate, especially when it comes to the LGBTQ stuff, though I could care less whether it's gay or straight or some weird thing in the middle. No pornography should be around kids. If an adult wants to do that, that's fine at a public library, but at a school library, I see very limited, very, very limited where you could do some things. That doesn't mean you ban the book. It means it goes to the adult section, just like a kid can't go to an R-rated or X-rated movie.
Yeah, exactly. We had a guest on the other day, Bill Scott, and he had to get certified to be able to be a volunteer, a coach and teacher of the kids in the schools. And he had to be screened, he had to be certified, he had to be qualified. And they told him these certain things you cannot do. If you do, you're going to be possibly arrested. And yet, that fear of his maybe doing some of those things doesn't compare to what they're already trying to do and doing that undermine those kids as bad or worse than anyone else could possibly do it. It's on a scale that's huge. So, what do we do? What is the best approach right now? You're going to run for the school district, and Eric is always at the school meetings, the school district meetings, and he's bringing people together to deal with that. How do you see that battle shaping up? Say, Eric?
Okay, I'm going first on this. All right.
Yeah.
I bring often 10 or 15 people with me, occasionally more, specifically from my group when it's a major issue at the school board. When it's something minor, it's a normal meeting, we might only have 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 people there. But we will come out in force. We've made an effort to teach people how to speak to government because you've got 2 or 3 minutes. You need to be concise. You're better off to leave some of your time on the table than to keep wandering. You need to get to the point. You need to be polite. If you come across as the crazy, they're just going to tune you out. We need to, because the left is looking for any opportunity to make us look bad. We need to look like the adults in the room. The biggest thing I think that's happening with education, aside from the very real indoctrination, is they've given up on the idea that parents have rights. The state is particularly in this state, seems to believe that they're not your kids. Now, I see that as a huge opportunity, even though it pisses me off. We need to harness that opportunity.
But doesn't it focus on the fact that they think they have rights and they want to exercise their rights at the expense of our rights? And that's really where I don't think we're doing a good job of defining that and explaining it. Of course, and whoever said you had a right to have a sexual preference? I mean, that's nowhere in the Constitution.
Yeah, and I think we have, and Eric addressed this too, I think we have a golden opportunity right now. I mean, we have been struggling against whatever you want to call them, the leftists, the Marxists, the wokesters, the regressives, whatever term you use. They have been very successful, very clever, and very patient for decades now. But I think they just handed us a golden opportunity because they've made a huge strategic blunder. And when you think about it, it's something they actually had to do. See, as you look over history, sooner or later, evil always comes after the children. Evil always comes after the children. And they've been doing it in an indirect way by degrading our educational systems and debauching our morals. But in the last few years, they've been getting much more directed about this. And in so doing, they've come against the force of nature. And you almost never go against the force of nature and win. And the force of nature I'm talking about is parental instinct. You've got paternal instinct, the papa bear, and you've especially got the maternal instinct in the mama bear. And we all know you don't mess with the cubs when mama bear is around because she's going to mess you up pretty bad. So that's what's been happening. And now across the country, we see at school board meetings and other organizations, parents are starting to rise up because they see what's happening to their kids. And this is one of the few areas where there's a great deal of agreement. I mean, America is so divided in so many issues right now that it's hard to imagine us ever getting everybody back on the same wavelength. But nearly everybody agrees about what should and should not be done with our kids. And so I think the left has handed us a golden opportunity here. If we cash in on this and we bring everybody together, and first we have to say, look what's happening in our schools. Look what's happening to your kids. We need to stop this, and that will motivate people. And then once we get them on board to help fix things in our schools and to take better care of our kids, then we can start spreading out and looking at other issues as well. And
exactly.
And I think we've got a great opportunity.
Well, Eric, have you noticed an increase in participation with the Constitutionalists of California?
Specifically with my group, but sadly, parents in Clovis are generally pretty happy. The only time we got huge numbers were parental notification and masks. Now, the parental notification all revolved around the fact that some of the Clovis Unified teachers were hiding the fact that some kids were choosing their own pronouns, choosing to use a different bathroom. What we have to remember is they're minors. If there's enough freedom, even though I think it's creepy and wrong to want to add parts or subtract parts, when they're minors, they don't have the full rights. The parents have the rights. Or in some cases, because they kept bringing up, well, they'll be abused. If the school board believes there is abuse in a household, they are mandatory reporters. So they have to report that no matter what. So it's not like anything would change. If they think there's abuse, fine. But what better guide is there? If you have a kid, you're truly connected to your kid. You truly are invested in their future because it's kind of your legacy. So it's just insane to me that would be hidden. We did not successfully get a parental notification policy, and I would want a broad-based one. LGBTQ happened to be the trigger this time, but it doesn't matter what it is. Any major issue that comes up, parents should be notified because they need to be part of that kid's life. The kids that do the best are always the kids that have parents involved, or maybe not always. I would willingly say the vast majority of the time. Of course, there's an exception here and there. The vast majority of the time, it's a stable, hopefully two-parent, though not always two-parent, but a stable presence and encouragement. That's why we see certain cultures within America doing so well. Asian families stick together, and they're on their kids to make sure that they do their homework, that they excel, that they demand excellence. Well, there's a model for the rest of us.
Exactly.
They've shown us a way forward.
Well, the group, the Moms for America.
I know Dawn Wells quite well. She runs the local chapter.
Well, how encouraging can that be? This group, Lawrence, is called Moms for America. They're nationwide, and one of our local volunteers and activists here, Dawn, has taken on that organization, and she's representing it.
We'll often cancel one of our meetings or go to 2 meetings in a week, and we'll try to go as a group to some other grassroots group. So we went to Moms for America meeting. We've been to Women's Federated a few different times.
Sure.
A couple times we've gone, and there's been enough of us. We've outnumbered the group we went to visit. But the important thing is, alone, we're not very powerful.
Exactly.
But if we can get all of these different people that have basically the same values to move in the same direction,
yes,
we become a lot stronger.
Well, Lawrence, you've written a number of books, but the one that intrigues me is your book on strategy and tactics. How do you see us organizing effectively?
Well, I think a lot of the things that Eric has talked about is critical. We need to get into some local organizations and then network those organizations. I've been working with a lot of these groups for the quarter of a century. And one of the things I've seen is they are very reluctant to work with each other. Everybody thinks they're going to solve the world's problems with their 20 or 30 members. Well, you're not. Link together, look for some kind of alliance in that regard. That's going to be important. Another thing, just a tactical matter, I want to kind of getting back on the last point. People need to be prepared to challenge what the other side is saying. Don't let some of their accusations go unchallenged. And I think two really good ways to do this is, one, ask them to define terms. I mean, you say, well, you're a hater, you're a fascist. Okay, time out. What's your definition of hate? And I can imagine them responding, well, everybody knows what hate is. Well, then it ought to be easy to define. Let's hear your definition. They probably can't do it, or fascist, they can't do it. And even if they did, now you've got something we can kind of hang our hook on and challenge some of their accusations. One of them you hear a lot is something that Eric mentioned here too, and that is, what about in terms of parental notification? Well, what if you have parents who would be abusive? They find out that their kids wants to go by a different pronoun or something like this. You're going to have some parents that are going to be abusive. I hear that argument all the time. You know what I never hear? I never hear a single statistic to back it up. What do the FBI crime records show? How many parents in the last 5 years have been arrested for child abuse after their kids notified them that they want to be called he or she or them or something contrary to what it says on their birth certificate? How many children have been seized by Child Protective Services because of that kind of abuse? They won't know. And so now you come back at them and say, well, this is just a straw man argument. But now one of the things here, I think the book that perhaps you were referring to is called AR2, Handbook for the Second American Revolution, which is what AR is. It's not assault rifle. It's not a different type of assault rifle. It's American Revolution #2. And first, let me say that because people start talking about revolution, you start seeing a yellow puddle forming around their shoes. Everybody gets nervous, like, oh no. Revolutions do not have to be violent. In fact, many have not been. And in fact, a revolution, a true revolution, is not really something new. The root word of revolution is revolve. So a true revolution goes back to something that existed before. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to go back to the values and principles that we had before, especially biblical and constitutional ones. Now, we didn't get it all right. Slavery is bad. Women should be treated equally. But we not only did a better job than anybody else in history, but we also gave, through the Constitution, an opportunity to correct our flaws without becoming violent. So anyway, in AR2, I talk about some things, but it's always going to be a constitutional basis. Our legitimacy comes through the Constitution. And so we must always root everything on the Constitution. But one of the things I think, the black hats, the bad guys, have been trying to redefine the Constitution. There's this concept about being a living document, which is just, it sounds really nice. The Bible is a living document. The Constitution is a living document. Oh, that sounds really good. It's just an excuse to redefine what's in there. And to me, one of the things we need to recognize is that the founding document of the United States is not the Constitution. It was written 11 years after our founding. The founding document is the Declaration of Independence. And it's critical that we start there, because in the Declaration of Independence is a philosophy of government that almost everybody misses. But it's important that we recognize that, because the Constitution was written in order to implement and institutionalize that philosophy of government. So what is it? Well, it's hiding in plain sight. It's among some of the most memorized words from the Declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Unfortunately, most people end their memory work there. If they just went 10 words further, they'd realize this is not just a collection of political platitudes. It is a profound and unique philosophy of government. And those next 10 words say that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Now, I'll tell people, read those passages backwards and it becomes crystal clear. Governments are instituted or created. Governments are instituted among men to secure these rights that are endowed by their Creator. Short form, the rightful role of government is to do the work of God. The political work of God is to secure these rights. And the Holy Trinity of rights is life, property, and liberty. Now,
nice.
Recognizing that, anytime there's any dispute about like how the Supreme Court or anybody else should try to understand and interpret the Constitution, go back to the founding document. And if the justices in Roe v. Wade had done that, we wouldn't have 63 million dead babies that we do now.
Yep.
You know, we hold these truths, look, a quick example, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Stop, time out. We already have our answer on Roe v. Wade. All people are created equal. Now, we're not talking about physically, mentally, emotionally, things like that. We're talking about before the law. Well, when does that equality kick in? Do you have to have taken a class, passed a test, have a nice little certificate? Do you have to be so tall to ride this ride? It says right there, we are created equal. So from the moment of our creation, that just conceived baby in the womb has the same legal rights as a 1-year-old, a 21-year-old, a 101-year-old. And what is the most solemn and sacred responsibility of government? To secure these rights. And the first right of all is life.
Nice.
Roe v. Wade is clearly wrong. And we use that. I call it linkage. We connect the Declaration and the Constitution, and that gives us some good ground to stand on to fight back against all of this living document nonsense that the black hats are using to undermine the Constitution.
Eric, that's pretty good stuff.
That is very good stuff. You know, I don't call them black hats. I tend to refer to them as cultural Marxists, but black hats works. I think that the majority of the Democrats up in Washington, you know, that they're okay with kids transitioning. They're not willing to be reasonable. Can you name one Democrat up in Washington that isn't for kids, not adults, kids? Now, I agree with your point that we have certain inalienable rights, but you don't have your full rights until you're 18. Mm-hmm. Now, I know the Constitution doesn't define that, but we have longstanding tradition to go with that. I'm kind of glad about that, because if I'd been given the choice to do anything I wanted when I was a teenager or younger, you know, probably my life would be a little different. Mm-hmm. And I think that most people could look back and reflect from a place of wisdom when they've got a little bit of experience to go, man, I was an idiot. So I truly hope that we find a place of reason in there. You know, our rights, obviously, the ones that are not defined, they fall to the people. I get that. And I want to have a place where there's as much freedom as possible, but we can't be insane with our youth. We are essentially committing cultural suicide with this whole transing kids.
Exactly.
And the thing here too about especially like for the preborn babies, a lot of rights don't kick in until a certain point, but you're not supposed to be able to take away someone's rights without due process.
Yep.
And none of those 63 million babies ever had a lawyer to represent them in court and argue why they should be allowed to live, have the most fundamental right of all. So again, this linkage concept, I think, can be very effective in warding off a lot of the attacks against the Constitution.
But, you know, to me, it keeps going back to this same concept that, yes, everyone has the same inalienable rights. It's afforded to every person, every citizen. But you can't trump someone else's rights. You can't infringe on someone else's rights in order to think you have your rights, which goes right to parental rights. You can't take the rights away from parents to manage their children, or you've just nullified their constitutional rights. So that seems to be the tactic that we're dealing with. They're making everyone want to believe how reasonable and how caring they think they are by being able to tell our kids they can choose their gender at 5 and 6 and 7 years old. I mean, it's insanity. So, Eric, what's is in your plans down the road with the Constitutionalists of California? Where are you going?
I think that we need to continue to build. We need more people, obviously. Please join us. Find us at constitutionalistforcalifornia.com.
Especially now. I mean, 1 year, we're on the countdown to 2024.
Right. You know, people, we've been so spoiled for so long. When I talk to first-generation immigrants, they are thrilled with the opportunity to define their own destiny. That they've got all of this, these almost unlimited, only limited by their hard work and their abilities, their gifts, and maybe a little bit of luck, but largely, the harder I work, the more luck I seem to have. Now that's a slight take off of Thomas Jefferson's very famous quote: "The harder I work, the more luck I seem to have." I got it slightly wrong, but I think that is just as true today as it always has been.
It is.
We need to realize how special this is,
Right.
how we have this opportunity. But guess what? With all of these privileges, there comes a responsibility, a duty to go out and preserve this for the next generation. We're only one generation from losing the most special thing as far as a government that's ever been created in the history of humanity.
Well, you know, the whole issue of getting people involved is like inertia. That which is at rest tends to stay at rest. That which is in motion tends to stay in motion. It's hard getting people up and out and doing something.
So if you can get them to do one tiny thing, don't try to get them to change their world.
Right.
See if
That's
you can
our
get them
job.
to do one little thing. If you can motivate your family. So we need to change ourselves in
Right.
order to be able to really affect our family and our friends.
Sure.
There's first step. Second step, now you've got to be willing to go out and talk to them about the things that make a difference in our country. Educate them. Even if everybody can talk about the First and Second Amendment, those aren't terribly difficult. You don't have to go farther than that. You start the conversation. You start with the
Nice.
low-hanging fruit and see if you can move somebody to, maybe they make a few phone calls for a candidate. Maybe they are willing to talk to their spouse. They're a friend of yours and they're willing to talk to their spouse about why this is a candidate that is the right one to support.
Well, give people the website again for Constitutionalists of California. I just did, but go ahead.
www.constitutionalist with an S on there or california.com.
And you meet when?
The Clovis chapter meets almost every Thursday night. We're missing the tonight and Thanksgiving, but
Sure.
we will be back on schedule
Right.
in Old Town Clovis at the American Legion Hall in
Nice.
Old Town. The Kingsburg chapter meets at the office of a church in downtown. I cannot remember the address on that. Sorry, but they meet Tuesday
They can
nights.
get on the website.
They can get on
right?
the website. They can find the details.
Right. Well, you know, Eric's working very hard, and we appreciate all that you're doing, all that the Constitutionalists of California is doing. And thank you, Lawrence, for all that you do. I mean, you're really stepping up, and you're taking on a lot of things, especially the school board. But you know, our heart and soul lies in our kids and getting them rescued out of this agenda that is coming down on us from every direction. It's coming down under the state government. I mean, the head of education is suing one of the school boards in Southern California because they didn't like what they did in stopping the pornography there. So appreciate you coming on the show. And you know, we're having a couple of events taking place that I'm really excited about. Tomorrow, our show is God, Business, and Country. And we're going to be taping it live with an audience at our location at 1123 Railroad Avenue, Clovis, California, near Clovis Avenue in Barstow. If you have the time and interest, come on by. We have lunch at noon. And then we start taping at 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. We have some great guests. Tom Summers is bringing Bill Smitkamp, which is one of our prominent business leaders in Fresno County, and Jimmy Foote, who is active and involved Christian pastor with a lot of heart and a lot of zeal. And then we're looking to see how we can support each other. You know, this meeting that we had with Moms for America was so inspiring. And Eric, the things that you do are so meaningful. Thank you all for being on the show today. Please tune in Monday through Friday, Wild About Liberty, 6 to 7 o'clock p.m. And if you have the time, look it up again. The website is constitutionalistforcalifornia.com. Go to one of the meetings, see where you can fit in and help. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Wild About Liberty with Terry Wild, only on KXEX 1550.